We'll make a start. Our next presenter is Chirag, and he will tell us how to improve our productivity with Microsoft Teams and 365 services. As always, at the end of the presentation, we'll take Q&A if we have time. And there will be also a raffle and a prize to win. So stick around. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Hi everyone, apologies for my fault. So yeah, welcome to my session, and so my session is about, as I mentioned, improving your productivity with Teams and Microsoft 365 services. A bit about me, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Chirag Patel. I live and work in London. I'm with PMCT and pretty much work as an IT pro with various organizations in the UK mainly, and really tend to cover off deployments and migrations. And also I run a user group on virtually at the moment, M365 UK. So there's my details there. Feel free to reach out if I can help in any ways. So that's a bit of me. What we're going to cover, because there is a lot to cover essentially. I mean, it is a demo pack session, so a few slides, and there's a lot of coverage of productivity side of things to cover off. So what tends to happen is we'll try and cover off Stream, Yammer, and some of the specifics from the integration. So the main focus of the session is the integration experiences that you get from the Teams, and some of this might be already familiar to you already in your environments. So we'll take a look at that, and obviously some of the content around the tasks and approvals and insights. And depending on how you use it, where you are, your mileage may vary in terms of exactly how you kind of go by using some of these services. You may not even be using Yammer at all, which is fine if you're a smaller organization, for example. But we'll take a look at that as well. In terms of the business scenarios, and this is a Microsoft slide that I've got, and again, depending if you're working on various activities, scenarios, use case, projects, this might fit in your things. And obviously, I don't kind of cover it in a great detail what the scenarios are, because I think we see a lot of sessions in Comsverse as well as in other communities how organizations make use of Teams and everything else. But at the end of the day, if it's kind of myself who's working on a particular project or for a department, all I need to have is access to all my tools and services in Microsoft 365 to be able to do what I need to do. So whether that's OneDrive or SharePoint, in a screen, doesn't really matter. But when you translate these use cases and scenarios into what this is, a kind of modern collaboration architecture. Again, it's a slide from the adoption .microsoft.com. Then you have a lot of pretty much a very good summary of what summarizes in terms of how you kind of use. And I do apologize, I think it's probably slightly clear, but you can see some of the tools we're really used as an organization when kind of enabling that capability, whether that's for your document management, whether that's for kind of for rolling out for Yammer to be able to have that company-wide conversations and all those things. But at the end of the day, at the top, it's kind of where you work with Outlook, Teams, in terms of sharing files and all those things. So we're looking at some of those things in great detail. But hopefully that kind of gives you a good summary of what the Microsoft 365, all the tools that you got right at the bottom there. That's kind of available. Some of them probably they might be disabled by your administrator in terms of some of the things you can't use in Teams, or you may not have the adequate licenses. So again, there's a huge documentation. I'll put the links on all these slides so you can have more info on that. So let's look at the stream. Now, the stream's been around for quite a while, and there's obviously a kind of a word going around there with the new stream version. But when you look at it from the user perspective, yes, it's a video sharing website for your organization that you put. A lot of it is driven by your Teams chat spaces. So every team that you create, we know that you get a Microsoft 365 group with it. So all your videos and all the content that goes can be linked to that. But at the same time, you've got your channels, and those channels are obviously not the ones that you see in your Microsoft Teams chat space. They're different channels all together within your stream environment. So again, that's kind of where how you group and organize your videos. But yeah, there's a few things in there which I want to kind of cover off the watch list side of things in terms of the integration. But when you look at the total integration within the stream itself, not just within SharePoint, then you'll find these are the kind of the maximum permutations you have, depending on which app you use. So whether it's SharePoint, creating a page, dragging the web parts to it to display a particular functionality or stream, or whether you use Teams and just basically showcase the video itself. So there's subtle differences within that. And then of course you've got your interaction with Microsoft Forms, so that you've been able to play that through half of the video, ask questions from the audience. So you can do all those things. But hopefully this kind of gives you the flavor, the style of who the individual is, or even if it's for a team or for the organization, depending on how you post it. So let's take a look at that example in the demo. So if I go into here, so if I come into, first of all, there's a couple of things I want to show you is within Teams as well as in the SharePoint aspect of it as well. So areas that you can do is obviously your tabs or the app by itself. So if I go into my Teams chat space and get my stream app in there, then typically this is only going to display your watch list. This watch list you probably have created if you're using the stream video itself. And you can kind of just go straight into that from here and add and remove as you please. And that watch list is quite good in the sense that when you create training videos or marketing videos, it is your personalized ones, which is separate to the ones you have like your channel videos. So depending on how you showcase that, then you can kind of go into here and add that. So again, it could be good for the new employee onboarding experiences as well. So if I go back to my products here, search for products, for example, back on the videos channel itself. Then what I'll find is, as you know, in the stream itself, I've got my couple of videos there, as well as the transcription and everything else, which is all searchable. Or I've got the channels in there, and I've got two channels in here, products and marketing. And this can be displayed in different ways. So I'm just going to grab that as a demo community itself. So if I go back to my Teams, and if I go back to Mark 8 project, which is one of the demo sites here, and go and add the tab, stream, and you've got many apps in the Teams app store there. And the good thing about here is that I can do the same sort of things here. So if I type in products, then I'll get a couple of options there. So same sort of familiarity that you would get, and then I can give the name of the tab, whatever, and display just the product videos in there. If I go into SharePoint, and if I'm creating a page, then I can do a lot more with that, in the sense that not just being able to be limited by what I'm getting displayed here, either a video or a channel. So if I go into a particular page, if I just go and create a page quickly, SharePoint, and then I'm getting various options, whether it's going to be pages, lists, or whichever. So I'm just going to pick pages here. Pick a demo page, and this could be a home page as well for that particular site, doesn't really matter. But the whole idea here is that I can still edit without leaving Teams and edit my SharePoint page within Teams itself. So I'll go ahead and edit that page, and while this page has got Yammer community conversations as well as other widgets itself, then here I can still display the same sort of functionality of videos, but a bit more, if you like, in the sense more options. So if I click on any of these particular stream videos, web part that I have, then I've got more options to either display a single video or a channel, or the whole of stream videos itself, depending on how I want to broadcast the audience. So on that page, there's going to be a lot more than just one tab of stream that I'll get for Teams. So your pages will make it more powerful, and once you're happy with that, you can just go ahead and publish that particular page. So if I come back on the stream itself, and whilst this is in here, obviously I won't cover the permissions side of things. But what you need to be mindful of as well is sometimes when these videos are getting stored and not deleted and all that, and obviously as it's been rolling out, some of all these videos will be living inside the SharePoint and OneDrive again, where you're creating them. So there's that happening as well. So purely because of, it's the right place to store that information. So something to watch out for in terms of depending on how you kind of do this. But the flexibility is there for being able to showcase your stream videos in different sort of ways in both SharePoint and Teams. Stepping up into Yammer side things, so you can still do, create your live events and things like that, and that's going to create a video which is in the stream itself. And Yammer's been around for many years. The yes is good and bad. A lot of people think, Yammer is kind of dead. There's the freshness of what the team's doing there. I probably have two different opinions depending on, like, if you're a small organization, you probably won't use Yammer because Teams is kind of the center of gravity for a lot of these things. You can still do a lot of those things that you see there in terms of praising and how it goes fresh and everything else. So why use Yammer? It kind of makes it, not just from a cultural perspective, but if you're multinational and everything else, it kind of helps you to separate those conversations. And if you're like me, and I find Teams such an overwhelming experience, because there's so many teams and channels, that sometimes I find Yammer can be a good way to just, not just purely from a visual perspective, but being able to then take away that conversation, that whole company-wide collaboration onto Yammer. So, yes, a lot of it is to do, questions and conversations that you create and being able to line those things. But again, similar to that, different types of communities you can create, and depending on how you kind of deploy that in terms of from an adoption perspective, but kind of 4 areas, whether that's communities of interest or functional communities, depending on what examples of those things you use. So if you have a team, then yes, you can have an all-wide team chat space, as you know, and you can still have everyone editing that entire team and be able to upload files. Same sort of functionality you get between Yammer and Microsoft Teams. But this one goes in a lot more kind of depth around that. And again, from an integration perspective, whether it's Teams, SharePoint, or even Stream, like I mentioned about the live events that you create, which I won't cover in this particular area. But you've got different websites, again, within SharePoint itself, to be able to bring that website and display that page that we were just looking at for Stream, bring that entire page onto the Teams. That will showcase your Stream and in Yammer as well. So let's take a look at that one as well. So if I go into the Teams, and first I'll show you the Teams part, and then we'll go into the SharePoint part. So if I click on my the add bar here, then I've got one here that I had earlier as well. So it's called Communities. You can still search for Yammer and still get that, and that will just obviously kind of display on your app bar, or whether you want to do it organization-wide, so it's always there. And so from this point of view, obviously, then you've got all the very quick ways of accessing your groups, if you like, as what it was called before, and now they're called communities. So being able to then have all that information going through that. So once you kind of got that, and again, because in Yammer there are topics, conversations, and all these things, so then you can actually slice and dice some of that feed from this Yammer itself to be able to bring that into various places for that. So that's one way of integrating in your teams from here. And then the other way is obviously going into the actual teams and creating a tab from that and being able to bring that conversation within here. So with this one, obviously, you can only choose one or the other, either community or topic. And that topic is obviously your hashtags. I'll pick community, and then I can just go and search all within the teams itself. So I'll go to leadership. Then I've got a couple there, a couple of communities. So just go ahead and say, and then you've got your tab for that particular team channel itself to be able to bring the same experience that you've got within that. No difference to what you got here as a tab versus in the app bar itself. If you look at the SharePoint perspective, go back to, say, retail docs, which is on the SharePoint site over there. And if I go into the home page for this site, same thing, if I edit the page here and I'll bring the Yammer, then I'll get more flexibility within SharePoint than, say, in Teams, for example. So I grab the Yammer. So here I've got two things. I've got the conversations and the highlights. So if I click on the conversations, then within that, I've got more options, either to bring the entire home feed, which is personalized to your kind of the member of the groups you have, or you can then display that by a particular user, CEO or anybody else, or just the entire community itself. So again, if I go to community and without searching, unlike in Teams, I have to tap in here. It's just basically detecting based on my login. So that I can go and pick safety, for example, and then do my conversation in SharePoint, and then be able to bring all that as well into Teams, just like the stream page that I tried to create earlier on. So you have different ways of integrating depending on how you use SharePoint versus Teams. Now, if you're doing a lot of it in Teams, because it's getting a lot more closer now, because up until recently you couldn't even edit the page inside Teams. So now you can do that. So at this point, all the editing that I've done here, you can do all that in Teams as well. So almost like looking at SharePoint, but it has its place. But yeah, I think it's getting a lot more richer and easier, so which is a good thing from a Teams perspective and the attention span for the users just to stay in Teams all the time. The other part I wanted to cover off is the actual files collaboration experience itself. So from a productivity perspective, I mean, I use Officecom all the time, every day when I come in. That's the first place I would go into to have a look, to be able to look at what's actually changing. But there's a couple of other places that you look, and depending on if you're under some public sector organizations, rely heavily on Outlook and for all these things. And so there's different ways of accessing and viewing those files itself. So firstly, if I go and hit Office.com, so if I go in here, depending on what I've shared and everything else, and you probably are familiar with this, then that's going to give me the entire list of files that I have from different SharePoint sites, not having to remember what is there. If somebody's supposed to edit it, sharing it, all that activity I'll get to see it. And I can then put it straight away to that particular file, or the actual site itself, which every team chat space gets a SharePoint site with it. So I've got my flexibilities in there to be able to navigate and go to a file that I'm going to have a look. If I go into that SharePoint site that I had just now, retail docs, then if I click on the actual within the site, and this again you don't get in Teams, but if I go in here, then at least I've got my sidecar itself to be able to get to the files that I want to get to. So I can still use my SharePoint document libraries, which is all my files which are very stored, as well as being able to get other information regarding this particular team. If I go into Outlook, then I can still see the same sort of experience within Outlook to see all my files and everything else. Now, that use case will be different because if somebody is kind of just working on file media itself all the time, where you have formal communications going on, where you may not use Teams, chats, or whatever, then one of the things I can do within here is, within the Outlook itself, I can then go and click on the group files. And that group files, it's called group files here, but it's essentially SharePoint files itself. So there's namings that goes everywhere. So in Teams, it's all called files. Here's for group files. If you go to SharePoint, they might use document library, but this is kind of the same thing. And all that functionality you see within Outlook, displaying all these files, views, and folders, it's all controlled by the views as well. So I'll still got my views in here and still be able to create different views to show different files. And I can even edit that current view so that this view can change. So I don't have to go in SharePoint to do edits. I can just go in Outlook and do all that, which is quite good. Okay. Any questions so far? even for the folks online. I don't know if there's anyone raised their hand or any questions. No, we can crack on. Okay. So the other part of the equation is the task itself in order for the productivity side of things. So again, this is kind of covering to do my tasks and the plan of tasks. And I know there's a session as well later on happening specifically around that. But there are obviously certain differences. So whether you're using Outlook or to do and all these things, I think the one that's the biggest one in here is within your key tasks tab. What you don't get is the My Day list. That is okay, which I think is kind of it's the one that really works for me anyways. But it's kind of worth bearing in mind that that's kind of rolling out and everything else in terms of the team. So that's named differently. So you've got tasks by planner, but eventually it's obviously tasks. That's going to get in there as well. So again, you can have a quick look at that. I've got my app file, and then again I've got here tasks by planner. Again, if you don't see this in your environment, it's probably because your administrator disabled it. This is kind of what sample view that I've got here. So I've got my tasks, which is kind of grouped into two areas. Shared plans, that's essentially your multiple plans in a planner for that particular team chat space. And then depending on which task you've got, all those things are displayed in here. So this market project plan still at the same plan of functionality in here, and to aggregate and group those planner tasks for the things you want, including the context switches. Is kind of good. The question I always get, when I'm kind of working with the organizations, is the project on the web, for example. If you're working on that Microsoft project, plans, and everything else, how does that work? And there's two different places for that, for planner versus the project itself. But for most part, for the task list that you have, this kind of works itself. I think I'll probably have a look at the session later on as well. I think in terms of where this is used and how what the pros and cons around it. But as far as Teams is concerned, it's there for you to be able to use and get to that. And then obviously, once within here, you've got your access to the board charts, the schedule, and everything else. So that's kind of one area to look at that. And the other part what I wanted to look at was the Viva Insights thing. So content approvals in a second. Actually, I'll put it now. So this is kind of it's been around a few months now, and that's obviously quite good. And again, it's a huge topic in itself when you use Power Apps, Power Automate, and being able to do. But the fact that you can do all that with Teams itself. So again, people prefer email sometimes to be able to get authorization for something or request for sign-offs. But from this perspective of Teams, and this you got without having to know anything about Power Automate, you got that approval, and you can have your own templates for those things as well. So very quickly, we can take a look at that as well. So if I go to my Teams, general, and if I kind of start my conversation within here, then so again, you've got many options within there itself to be able to do that. And the screen itself is kind of just on the video itself. But once you come into the approvals itself, then you've got that basic template you have in here, being able to then type in. So for example, let's say, get new resource for the project. And again, this is a huge change from what I see that people are used to the emails and to come and be able to do this kind of thing in here. So I'm going to click on Megan. So the request will go to Megan itself, and if I want to see multiple people, then that option will open up there as well. So then I'll just have that option there for multiple approvals in there. And then once I'm happy with that, if I'm the attachment files, I can go for that. In this case, I'll just kind of send off. And then that's just a very quick way of just sending that approval template, the approval request for that. And so that stays in your chat itself, but also being able to still view all your approvals that in one place as well. Didn't need to do an email. What I can do is obviously I can still have a chat within that particular approval email and still have that commentary going on. But if it's kind of a team chat versus a group chat, then it doesn't really matter where it is, because in the sense that if you go and have your approvals app in here, then at least you can see all your different chats you may have, different approval requests and everything else from here, and you get all that information. So that's pretty much all in one place I have to go. I don't have to go in Power Automate, and I can see all my requests, if it's been approved, all that will show. So it's a very neat way. It still means that you're still tied up with teams, a lot of these things. So to get a break from, from a well-being perspective, the fact that, I not only like to study with teams every time, but I just find it very hard to believe how do you get a break from these teams, from everything else, if everything what you do is all these actions. So it's a good balance to understand what you can do, but hopefully that speeds things up, certainly from a productivity perspective, to be able to do all that within that. And then if I want to create new templates, then I can manage those templates. Again, there's an administration controls there as well, so I can create business string, leave requests, all those things. And for those of you who are in kind of SharePoint world, I know years ago there used to be something called like a Fab 40 templates, SharePoint site templates, absence management and all these things. This is not kind of far off from that, in order to have some of those things without requiring a SharePoint site. So it's kind of a good plus from that perspective. Okay. Viva Insights, bit of renaming, rebranding, still growing, all the teams matters, existing customer code. It's kind of free in your existing license. Obviously, if you have your other views like managers or organizations, then that's going to cost you, I think, something like $2 or $6 per month per user per month or something like that. But when you look at this part here, again, it looks a bit clunky when you look at the Viva Insights part, and I think there's obviously more to come with the entire Viva side of things. But if you look at the Insights itself, particularly here, so if I go to Viva Insights, so again, similarly, if it's disabled, you won't see it. But if I go into my account in here I can do a lot more organizing about myself in terms of being able to arrange schedules to send praises, for example, depending on what I send to you. So you can do all that within here. But also being able to kind of have stay connected, progress plan, and I think there's two, depending on that loads up. So based on the schedule that you may have organized to take time out, whatever, that's going to display. From a productivity perspective, again, how you compare that with the general control of your day-to-day multi things. Yeah. So that's obviously kind of the recent activities that I've got within this particular areas. But if I had particular people to this, then obviously I would get information about those as well. Again, if you compare this to say, for example, like Dell, in terms of Dell picking up all the analytics and everything else, this comparison and contrast to be made within those tool sets itself. But this probably gives you a slightly more better view. I mean, Dell is still there, still use it. If I go to different organizations, then I can get more info from Dell than I'll get it from here. So this is obviously doesn't grow as a kind of a way of periodically updating and making it more richer. The one that I kind of look at it, the other one that I look is the feeling part. When you go into the Wellbeing site and look at the, how you're feeling, so happy or value. But when you look at this graph in terms of the reflection history-wise, I personally don't like it because it's going to have it's always going to have ups and downs. Some days you're going to feel good, some days you're not going to feel bad. But what, as you as an individual, you're going to do about it? There's no answer to those things. There's nothing to show here. But I've seen other samples where you just got basically ups and downs. So for me personally, I just don't like it. But it's there if people want to see it. And then yeah, there's some reminders. So the things, good stuff. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm going to cover on the Viva Insights side of things. Last what I wanted to just show you is a lot of this which comes into Viva connection. It's essentially just a box really. So if I go into my Teams, if I go into my landing page and you know your own logos and things like that, then all this is just a SharePoint site. I know there's kind of just last week I think there's a mobile version of the Viva Connections app. It is a free, it's included as part of your SharePoint license, and so all the efforts is going in that without having to go into SharePoint altogether. So you got the best bits of SharePoint inside Teams. So. And yeah, all the demos that I showed you here, Stream, Yammer, all these things, you can still do within this part as well. So depending on how many sites, SharePoint sites you have. So. Right, okay, I think I'm pretty much there, so let's go back to slides. Yeah, that's the screenshot I was referring to, how the feelings have changed over time. Great. Meeting scenarios. I mean, again, this probably takes a lot of session itself, and I think there is a session on this as well for how to, I think it's a session by Marriott, I think as well. So again, this is just some of the examples of what type of meetings you have. Personally, I tend to avoid ad hoc meetings altogether, and especially if there's no real scope for it, then it's a total waste of my time. And if I think up to 3 minutes, especially with chats, if the chat is just going to get longer, then just call it out. So it's a kind of a 3-minute rule, if you like. No point having a long chat threads and just kind of going on that. So for some things, yes, but for a lot of the stuff, I think it's more around how you structure. And I think this only comes about if specific cases have been displayed. Now, I know Corona, it's more mentioned about this digital champions platform, and if you've got an adoption site already inside your environment, and that's probably a good place to put this kind of scenarios in there, some of the best good practices in terms of what works for the organization. Okay, I think that's pretty much all. I know that's probably a lot covered within that. Hopefully that's given you a flavor. By all means, it's not a full stretch of improving productivity from that perspective, but hopefully it's given you some of the shortcuts of making some of the information displayed in a particular way. So thanks very much, especially the Commons organizers in terms of Mark, Randy, and Martin for bringing here, and also thanks to you as well. And speaking next month again in Southampton. So we're doing the whole workshop on Viva itself. So try and register those if you can, and then also a session on Saturday as well. So yeah, thanks for having me.